It is exactly 16 after 9 o'clock. Welcome to the second hour of News and Views with me, Julie Ali. And of course, a big welcome to our Polokwane listeners on One Nation FM. Coming up in the next hour, we are going to be talking with Marumo Sekgobela, Health Thematic Program Manager at Save the Children South Africa. And of course, we are going to be talking about the significance of Infant Protection Day, which is in fact today. Also on the show, we're going to be discussing the struggle against apartheid Israel. But first up, we are going to be talking with Liziwe McDade. She is the strategic lead at the Green Connection, and we're going to be looking at COP27. A very good morning to you, Liziwe. Welcome to the program. Nice to be talking with you.
Good morning, Julie, and good morning to all your listeners.
Okay, this is very important, COP27. We need to look at how we move forward on this issue, what's happened in the past at previous COPs, what were the deliverables like, what was discussed in the past, have we seen any deliverables or any inputs into this issue? But you've been an activist all your life. You've now moved into this area of activism. And good on you, because we want to save the planet. What does that transition look like from hardcore politics into, saving the planet, into greening the world, into, getting rid of our carbon footprint, in making this planet greener and safer for future generations?
It's a human rights struggle once again. I think many years ago, we had to fight on a human rights basis in South Africa to overcome the apartheid government. Now we are facing a global, I could almost say it's similar to apartheid, where rich industrialized nations have used the carbon resources they've had, and now the result of that has been climate change, and the result of climate change is weather patterns that are shifting, and now we are seeing droughts, we are seeing floods like we've had in KZN this year, and that's going to increase. And so this becomes a human rights issue. And so for 27 years, we have seen world leaders flap around the world, go to different places and sit down and talk about how to resolve this. I think what's very critical is that there has been a huge reluctance to acknowledge that the West and industrialized countries are really responsible for the climate crisis that we find ourselves in. We can't completely absolve. Yeah.
Okay, you can continue that thought.
Well, we can't absolve South Africa because South Africa sits with an 85% coal-based power fleet, and the rest of Africa doesn't have anything near that. And so what we also need to acknowledge is that our own footprint is not zero. But where we're sitting right now is we need to move. We need to go. The new renewable energy. South Africa has some of the best solar resources. So how do we utilize this resource to make ourselves a strong economy? But if it's got to be a transition, it's got to be a fair and just transition. And that's what the debate and the negotiations in Egypt are about. We are being offered loans. Loans mean you have to pay it back.
Absolutely.
Interest. So who is gaining? How are we benefiting from having to borrow money to solve a problem we didn't create? That's not justice. So if we're talking about a just transition, then we need that funding to go towards ensuring that South Africa is not worse off because of those loans. So I think that would be one aspect. And the other aspect is right down here at home, people on the ground. We have a lot of people who've invested their lives in the coal industry. Now we need to move away from that. There's no doubt we need to move. It's no good being stick in the mud as some of our politicians are and demanding we have more coal. No, we've got to move. But we have to move in a way that those people whose lives have been about the coal industry are not left behind. And not being left behind doesn't mean that at 50 years old you must suddenly train to be a renewable technician, but that there needs to be some monetary package that you can retire and relax or be part of decommissioning of coal power. So you stay with your skills, but you become part of the just transition.
Okay, there are two or three very important issues that I need to raise with you here. Firstly, we do know that the UN Climate Change Summit has opened in Egypt as you and I speak, with a warning that our planet is, and I quote, sending out a distress signal, exactly what you've said. Then let's look at the issue around people that have been in the coal mining industry and that value chain for hundreds of years. How do they transition? What's their future like if we're going to be shutting down all the coal plants? Last week, Monday, we do know that the Komati plant had been decommissioned, so to speak, and undoubtedly hundreds of families will be impacted by that shutdown. I spoke to an energy expert at that point last week, and he had very, very strong views regarding renewable energy. His suggestion, I'm not going to give you the name of the person I spoke to. Maybe I'd have both of you together on a show sometime soon to debate this. His suggestion is that South Africa is rich in natural minerals, and obviously coal being one of the reserves that we have. And he also indicated that we have reserves that will keep us going for at least another 150 years. He also dismissed the independent power producers that are now being commissioned by Andre de Ruyter, Eskom, and other entities in the country. According to him, once again, it's a big money-making racket. Your thoughts?
I think we've had a money-making racket in terms of power delivery for many years. What was Kusile and Medupi, if not a money-making racket? Because those were commissioned at the time when we knew about climate change. I don't think that renewable energy or any kind of energy is like linked to making profits. It's not like you can make profits out of one and not out of the other. The issue is we need a proper plan, and where all the evidence is put on the table so that we are not being dragged in one direction or the other direction every time we wake up in the morning and some minister makes some or other statement about which direction we're going from an energy perspective. So we need a proper plan. And that's why the Green Connection wrote to the president last week, basically saying we're going to go to court to force the government to implement a piece of law that's been in our statute books but hasn't been promulgated since 2008, which says that South Africa must have an energy plan which is revised every year. That energy plan must involve the voices of South Africans, because we need to see the information and the evidence and then make our own minds up as to which direction we should be going. So any expert can stand and make claims about any particular energy source, but the issue is we need a plan where we can evaluate that, we can all participate, we can all be comfortable that the energy plan that is chosen going forward will benefit South Africans first and foremost.
So Liziwe, let's look at COP27. This conference has been running for the past 27 years to try and address these issues. Do you believe that anything has come out of it? Is it going to still be another talk shop? We know that they're talking about moving, world leaders should be urged to move faster on renewable energy. Why does this climate conference matter at all if 27 years later we've not really seen any tangible results? And what exactly gets discussed here? What sort of horse trading goes on here? You spoke about the big loan to countries like South Africa, but that has to be repaid, and has to be repaid at interest. How sure are we that it is viable, if at all?
Well, you're talking to a little bit of a cynic, because my view is that if you took those world leaders and instead of putting them in a nice air-conditioned hotel, you put them in a tent in the middle of the desert, then they would make up their minds a lot quicker. So there are people whose careers have been built. I mean, 27 years, you can have a career in negotiating. If we were to solve the problem, those people's careers would disappear. I mean, maybe that's too harsh, but the bottom line is that's partly, from my perspective, why we seem to be taking forever. And it's definitely, the commas and the full stops get debated at length. But the bottom line is what we need is a plan. And we had a plan in Paris where everyone agreed we need to reduce, and the two aspects of it. Yes, we need to reduce our carbon emissions. And yes, we need to build alternatives. But B, we also need to acknowledge that the climate impacts that are happening on the most vulnerable countries first, and to the worst. And so those who are responsible need to contribute to the solutions at that country level. And that's where the sticking point comes, because suddenly everyone's happy to talk until it comes to committing hard cash to the problem.
Liz, how do people actually supply the evidence to suggest that it is the third world countries that are, suffering the effects of climate change, and that is directly due to the full-scale industrialization of first world countries? How do you actually prove that, number one? And then also, you spoke about the Paris Agreement. What about Glasgow? There were a lot of deliverables that were supposed to come out of there. And I'm kind of wondering, has there been any action at all?
So to answer your first question, there's a panel of scientists internationally which sit there and work through reports. So they're like dozens and hundreds of scientists all around the world that are actually gathering the evidence. And over the last 27 years, they have been able to prove that the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is most certainly due to human causes, and then they have been also now able to track, for example, the latest is that methane, in other words, gas, is a major contributor to climate change, which it was not thought of so much in the past. So every year they get better and better at bringing that evidence to the table. So I don't think there's any doubt. The importance of global action is that there's only one planet. It's not like half the countries or the people can wander off somewhere else, despite the claims of those that would go to space. So we have to deal with it, and the only way to deal with it is as a globe, as all together. So that's why those climate talks are important. But when we come down to like Glasgow, where we had this promise of 8-point-something billion, but when you look at the small print, very little of it is grants. In other words, it's not money to say, okay, here you can here, this will help you transition, this will help you cope. It's kind of, we'll loan you the money, but now we want it back, and you have to pay us interest. Now, on what basis is that fair? So this is where you then get the wrong attitudes, where people now say, well, we've got our own coal, so we'll just burn it anyway. Well, hello, there's one planet. We're going to be the ones that suffer. So that's not the solution. So I'm really hoping that our negotiators are going to be quite hardline in Egypt, demanding the real reparations. We need that money. We need that breakthrough where nations who promised, they've been promising for years. They've promised, there was a huge fund set up, I don't actually remember which year, where it was, $100 billion a year or something like that for developing countries. And none of that money, or very little of it, has come through. So it's and that's supposed to be to help people transition. It's not about the developed world making more money through loans and interest. It's about giving money to help people develop and to help build an economy. It's not that we be sitting with, it's a debt we are owed. It's not that we have to sit there and beg. If we're all in it together and someone has been unfairly treated, then those that have been unfairly treated need to be compensated. it's not charity that they should be doing. It's not that,
Okay.
you know.
Would I understand you correctly by saying that yes, as third world countries, yes, we are dependent on those loans. Those loans are going to help us through a just transition, however long it takes. Yes, we will repay those loans, but without interest. Is that a model that could be workable for third world countries, number one? And number two, my final question to you, are you hopeful that anything meaningful will come out of COP27, or have we reached a stage of desperation?
We have to have success, to answer your last question first. We have to have success because there's no planet B. But to answer your first question, yes, concessional finance, which would be a loan at zero interest, would be perfect. That would be great. And particularly if you've got like a payback window, they'll say 7 or 8 years, so you don't have to pay back for the first few years, so that you can actually build your infrastructure, you can get everything going before you have to start to pay back. But I would go one step further and say some of that money must be grants. Grants given with no expectation of payback.
Okay, are you hopeful at all? What are you hoping to come out of COP27?
I'm hoping if we can break through the deadlock of loss and damage. So in other words, where there is impacts of climate change, countries are experiencing that there's going to be some form of compensation for that, in addition to the finance for the just energy transition. So I wish our South African negotiators all the best in pushing back against the industrialized nations in order for that. It's a human climate crisis, and we're all in it together, and we really have to break through this deadlock.
Liziwe McDade, a strategic lead at the Green Connection. Thank you indeed for your time. Lovely talking with you. Till the next time, go well.
Thank you so much.
It is exactly 9:34. Still to come on the show, we are going to be talking with Health Thematic Program Manager at Save the Children South Africa, and we are also going to be talking to some visitors from the Middle East, and that would be a Palestinian advocate and a lecturer at the Al-Quds University in Jerusalem. He is a member of Mizan's delegation that is currently touring South Africa. So let's hear what that tour is all about, what we can learn from that tour, and how we as South Africans can support this delegation on possibly a fact-finding mission. It is exactly 9:34 a.m. This is News and Views on Salon Media.